Hello everybody, I am Dr. Sonali Pawar. This is my video lecture on the topic Universality in Obituary and Dawn at Puri. This lecture is meant for MA First Special English students. Friends, let me explain first that these two poems are by two different poets. So first I would like to explain the first poem, Universality in Obituary. Obituary is a thoughtful poem written by A.K. Ramanujan. This poem is taken from A.K. Ramanujan's poem Relationship, poems 1971. A.K. Ramanujan is a multilingual poet writing in more than two languages, Tamil, Kannada and English. His poetic output in English consists of two slender volumes, The Striders and Relations. And Obituary is A.K. Ramanujan's poem taken from his volume Relations, poems 1971. Most of the poems in this volume, Relations, deal with the poet's memory of his relations and his strong sense of history. And the poem Obituary is also not an exception to it. Actually, this is an elegy which is written after the death of his father to mourn the father's death. Now see, this poem is written in mock heroic tone, but actually under its cover the poet has hidden his grief and seriousness about the death of his father. So we will turn to the next point of our poem, universality of the poem. Let me explain first the term obituary. Obituary means the account of life, career and achievement of the dead published in newspapers or in some other way for the benefit of the people at large. In the present poem, the poet remembers his dead father long after his death. So this is an elegy written on the death of his father. The tone is flippant, mock ironic, but it is merely a cover to hide his essential seriousness and poignancy of his grief. Now see, from the very first stanza, the poet explains to us in mock ironic tone how poor his father was. See what kind of legacy he has put behind for his children. When his father died, he left his sons and daughters no legacy except dust on a table full of papers, debts to be repaid by them, a sickly bedwetting grandson, and old decaying house. This is the legacy his father has put for his children. He also left them his ashes and two coins with which his eyes has been closed. After his death, there are some coins. The two coins were put on his eyes, and those two coins, his burnt ashes, unburnt spinal disc, these are also the legacies. According to the poet, in mock ironic tone, he has said that these are also the legacy put behind by his father after his death. Now see what he says further about his father, about the legacy and how his emotions are related to that. He says, he also left them his ashes and two coins with which his eyes had been closed, and several spinal discs, charred but not fully burnt out, though his father was a burning type. Means he was not fat, or he is very ordinary man who can be easily burnt, and had burnt. His dead body was also burnt properly at the time of cremation, though that was not fully burnt, and it has put behind the spinal discs, which are also the legacy, according to the poet, put behind by his father for them. The ashes which he left there were thrown by them according to the instructions of the priest. As per the instructions of priest, they have thrown the ashes of their father at the place where three rivers meet, near a railway station. Actually, this suggests us the tradition of cremation. The body must be burnt. It must be burnt fully. Those two coins must be kept on the eyes of the dead body. Again, his ashes must be thrown at the place where three rivers meet, and so on. These are the traditions of cremation he has discussed here, which give Indian touch to this poem. Thus, the poet stresses he left them nothing else except, see the list once again. According to the poet, after the death of his father has put behind for his children the legacy of dust, debts, also daughters, that is also responsibility of a son, then grandson, old decaying house, and of course his own ashes and spinal disc and the toys, nothing more than that. So this description, this list of legacy, through this list of legacy, the poet stresses the poverty of his ordinary father and his consequent suffering, and thus reveals his real love and grief for the dead father. The poet uses the negative of caution. Further, the poet uses the negative of caution. See how? To warn us against supposing that a headstone had been erected in his memory to record the story of his life deeds. In India, when a man dies, or anywhere in the world when a man dies, the people in memory of that dead person, they erect one headstone giving information about his great deeds for the people or for the family. And the poet clearly, in very clear-cut words, tell us that his father was an ordinary man, and he, as a son of that father, knows that his father was poor and very ordinary man, so there is no need of erecting headstone for him. He was a poor, obscure person to whom death must have come as a welcome relief. Very often the poor people, the ordinary people, the helpless people think that the death can be their relief, welcome relief. They launch for death, and in the same manner the poet says that my father also launches for death. So there is nothing surprising or not an exceptional case that my father dies. It's ordinary thing. It's day-to-day part of our life. Then in the next stanza, the poet continues with the obituary of his father in the same mock ironic tone. The poet says that his father did many things, as everybody's father does. My father also had did many things, but see, again he continues his mock ironic tone and says that, but he did not actually do them. Actually, my father is not so much great who has done such heroic things. These things are not done by my father, rather they happened to him. There was no any his own role in his own hand in happening those things. Those things naturally happened to him. And see, what are those two things? For example, take his birth. Taking birth and meeting death, these two things are not in person's hands. And in the same manner, the poet suggests that the poet shows that his father has done two important things in his life. Actually, he has not done them, they were happened to him. And the first thing is that take his birth through a caesarean operation in a slum where poor Brahmins lived, and his death by heart failure in the fruit market. His father has taken the birth through caesarean operation, though they were poor Brahmins. And secondly, he dies in the fruit market suddenly because of heart failure. And these two striking things in the life of this common poor man. Such are the two achievements of his career, but even they are not the subject of Such are the two achievements of his career, but even they are not the subject of any long-standing headstone. These two achievements are not sufficient to erect his headstone, according to the poet. Nobody remembers these events. Nobody remembers after the death of a man how he took birth. Even he dies, that is sufficient. How he died, that is also not an issue for the people. So nobody remembers these events except the loving and grieved poet, because he is the only son of that father, and that father, as any child, he loves his father very much. So that is the great loss for this son. The very fact that he sings of these events brings out his real love for his father, which he tries to hide but is unable to do so under the cover of a mocking, flippant tone. Though we can see here that he has used mocking tone, ironic tone, he has used it to describe the death of his father, the legacy his father has put behind for them. Though under that cover, he is also expressing, he is hiding his best, as our Indian tradition tells the sons not to cry, not to express the grief. In the same manner, he hides his grief, but in vain. He cannot hide it properly. He cannot hide it completely. Behind this guise, behind this cover, we can clearly see that he feels pity. He feels very sad after the death of his poor ordinary father. The real concern and solicitude of the poet for his father are brought out by the fact that he reads old newspapers in the hope of finding in them 2 lines about his father, which he has been told were published in the columns of Madras newspaper. After the death of his father, one relative informs the poet that, see, I have seen in Madras newspaper one day the 2 lines information about your deceased father. So the poet knows that his father is ordinary man, though he wants to read those 2 lines which are published in Madras newspaper. And so his real concern and solicitude we can see in the fact that he reads old newspapers. He tried to gain old newspapers in the wish, in the hope of finding in them the 2 lines about his father, and that is what the obituary. Then at the end of this poem, see what the poet says. This elegy ends as it began, with the poet adding, enlisting the catalogue of the things their father has left for them. See the first stanza of the poem, what it says. Father, when he passed on, left dust on a table full of papers, left dads and daughters, a bedwetting grandson. This is the first stanza of this poem, and see, as if there is a continuous idea. See the last stanza of the poem. And he left us a changed mother and more than one annual ritual. So he enlisted from the first line to the last line the legacy put behind by the dead father for him: dust, dads, daughters, grandson, ashes, and a widow mother, and yes, of course, one more annual ritual. His father, in addition to the legacies already listed, he also left them a changed mother, a mother changed into a widow, and also changed by grief at the loss of her husband. He also left for them a number of rites to be performed annually according to the age-old customs and traditions. In this way, we can see that this is an autobiographical poem written by K. Ramanujan on the occasion of death of his father. So this is also a good example of elegy which mourns the death of the poet's father. Here in this poem, under the mock ironic tone, the poet tries to hide seriousness, grief, concern and love for his dead, ordinary, poor father. While reading this poem, particularly the last 4 cryptic lines reveal that the poet is a Western trained intellect who is looking at the things from Oriental point of view with a detached interest. In short, we can conclude this poem by saying that this poem has the familial theme, death of the father. Familial experience it is, which is linked up with the historical and traditional themes to achieve universality. Thank you. Now friends, I would like to speak on the second poem, Dawn at Puri. As I have told you earlier, we will again see universality in the poem Dawn at Puri. This poem is written by Jayant Mahapatra. Now see the introduction of Jayant Mahapatra. Jayant Mahapatra is a bilingual poet writing in both Oriya and English. Mahapatra's sensibility is essentially Indian. Indianness in Oriyan poetry we can see very clearly in his poems, Jayant Mahapatra's poems. Regional is raised to the universal level, and this is the characteristic of Jayant Mahapatra's poems. Now see, we will discuss about the poem Dawn at Puri. Friends, Puri is the name of famous town of Orissa. This Puri is also known after the Lord Jagannath, Jagannath Puri. The famous great temple of Jagannath is the center of attraction in Jagannath Puri. Temple of Jagannath is famous place of worship, and so there is a certain sanctity about this town. It is particularly famous for its annual religious festival which is held there to honor a deity by the name of Jagannath, Lord Jagannath. So great temple of Jagannath is very famous place, and because of it this Puri in Orissa is also known as Jagannath Puri. One more thing is famous around this place is that Puri is regarded as a sacred town. As Puri is regarded as a sacred town, it is the wish of most people belonging to a Orissa to be cremated on the sandy beach after their death. Now see, the people of Orissa like to be burned, like to be cremated on the sacred beach, sandy beach of Puri. In fact, the beach at Puri is a long stretch of a cremation ground. Funeral pyres are to be seen all along the beach. In the present case, now see how he describes Jagannath Puri in this poem from the beginning. This poem, see how it begins. Endless crow noises, a skull on the holy sands, tilts its empty country towards hunger. See, the very beginning of the poem suggests us that this poem has a sad tone in it. That is the dawn time, as the title suggests, dawn at Puri. It is dawn time, early morning time, and though that is early morning time, there is endless cawing of the crows, and that is very important. First thing the poet notices at the very morning of Puri, at Puri. The poem depicts the morning scene on the sandy beach at Puri. The first thing he noticed is the endless cawing of the crows. The next thing he noticed is a skull which the speaker in the poem notices on the holy sea beach where dead bodies are cremated. Means these two very pessimistic things he catch on the sandy beach of Puri. Skulls and crows around. To the speaker, the sight of this skull brings the idea of the extreme poverty and penury of the people of Odisha. When he sees those skulls scattered around on the seashore of Puri, suddenly he notices the poverty of Odisha, which is the representation of India also. Extreme poverty of the people, penury of the people. He noticed there at the great temple of Puri. The poet goes ahead in the next stanza by describing the devotees gathered at the gate of great temple. The speaker observes a large number of widows. They wear white garments. They are waiting to enter the great temple in order to offer their daily worship and to perform the holy rites. All these widows have passed their middle age and are therefore elderly women. He noticed that all these are the elderly widow women. There is an expression of solemnity in the eyes of these women. In fact, their eyes are full of despair like the eyes of creatures which have been caught in a net. The only thing that sustains these women is their religious faith and the hope which is born of it. They have great faith in Lord Jagannath, and that is the only relief in their helpless, very unhappy kind of life. They all stand in a group looking timid and having no confidence in themselves. See the devotees around the great temple, which are observed by the sensitive mind of Jayant Mahapatra. All these sufferings of the people, all these poverty of the people of Orissa, all these things, those cawing crows, the skulls scattered around, all these things moved the poet by the heart. Deep from his heart, he was moved by all these pathetic, very poor, very helpless kind of scene. In the next stanza, he discusses about a sullen solitary pyre. There was one pyre burning, and it reminds the poet his mother's last wish. At this moment, in this depressive atmosphere, a sudden thought occurs to the speaker in this poem. His mother, she is getting old, and she had said once that her last desire in life is that after her death, she should be cremated here at the seashore of Jagannath Puri, on the sandy sea beach where all the pious people wish to be cremated. And with the thought of death of his own mother shudders him. It makes him upset, as if one more suffering, one more grief is added into his aching mind. In this way, this poem ends at the note of personal experience. As the poem before we have discussed before, Obituary, there is also Indianness which describes some traditional things, religious things, isn't it? In the same manner, in this poem, there is an Indian touch, Indian flavor in religious setting of Puri and the traditions of cremation, etc. But very important similarity in both of these poems is that both these poems, poets Jayant Mahapatra and A.K. Ramanujan, they both converted their own personal experience into universal ones, and this thing gives it achieves universality on the part of both these poems. Thank you. Thank you so much.